そのサービスはいらないかな。
According to interviews, there was going to be a third Evil Within game despite the low sales, but eventually Tango Gameworks decided to change course to create an entirely new IP. Personally, that was the better move on behalf of the Evil Within because in my opinion, the series ended on a perfect note. But did Ghostwire Tokyo have the impact that other new IPs had for their own studios who changed course from their established formula? Well, let's find out.
お兄さんですか。妹さんの容体が良くない。急いでください。
The game starts when Tokyo resident Akito is on his way to see his comatose sister Mari at the hospital, only to crash in a fatal accident. But moments before his death, Akito is suddenly possessed by a spirit calling himself KK. Just as he's brought back to the realm of the living, a mysterious fog engulfs Tokyo and all the residents besides Akito vanish while a legion of demonic spirits called the Visitors walk among the streets. Shortly afterwards, Akito makes it to the hospital only to see a mysterious figure in a hyena mask abduct his sister for whatever nefarious deeds he has planned. With practically no one left in Tokyo, it's up to Akito and his new partner KK to harness an acquired set of elemental powers to fight against the Visitors and stop whatever the mastermind of this phenomenon has planned with Mari. The premise leans heavily into Japanese culture and folklore about the afterlife, which is unique and fascinating. Meanwhile, the characters in the main story are inconsistent. The first few hours of the game instantly have you hooked, but the middle part grinds to a halt, not helped by the actual grinding you could find yourself doing. Meanwhile, the characters feel like they are stuck in limbo and unable to be developed properly, though part of that is because I didn't play the free prologue visual novel beforehand. And another reason might be because I chose to go with the sub option instead of the dub to respect the weeb overlords, so it was easy to miss critical information during the small talk during gameplay. And another reason for choosing the sub is because the dub...
It's a pain in the ass for me, and you're on your own. We're done, now move.
Don't order me around!
Feels more off than most anime dubs, but even so, I will concede that the ending saved the game for me. Well, that and the spider's thread, but we'll get to that later. So let's move on to the other parts of the game to see where it flies, but also falls. From a distance, it would be easy to call this game Far Cry Tokyo, and I wouldn't blame you for thinking that. Your goal of the game is to navigate the icon-filled open world while undertaking main missions, side missions, and acquiring collectibles while collecting XP for upgrades and money for purchasing items. You can walk, sprint, crouch, use a flashlight, jump, mantle over objects, and use a variety of mystical powers to traverse Tokyo and fight against the Visitors. Instead of shooting guns, you are granted the ability to weave elemental projectiles from your hands thanks to your spectral partner. The elements include wind, which acts like a handgun, water, a shotgun, and fire, a rocket launcher. Each of these uses ammo in the form of ethers, which are acquired when you defeat enemies or break floating objects around you. You use the elements to damage the Visitors until their core is exposed. You can either keep firing until they're killed, or pull the cores out from a distance by holding down the aim button. The nice feature is that you can pull multiple exposed cores at once, but doing this will leave you vulnerable to attack, so you'll need to choose when to do it. You can also melee and block. If you get a perfect block, you'll have the opportunity to send projectiles back or send out a shockwave towards the melee attacker. You also acquire a bow for more silent attacks, and you'll get your hands on talismans, which provide a variety of areas of effect in combat. To heal yourself, taking enemies' cores will heal you slightly, but the primary way is to use food, which you find all around the map and purchase from vendors. Each food is unique and divided into categories of regular, drink, and spectral, which will give you a temporary buff. When you're in combat, the Visitors offer a unique combat experience with their many variants within several categories. Walkers are the most common enemy who hold an umbrella that could be used as a shield against your projectiles, while powerful sub-variants have unique behaviors. Students are nimbler with melee attacks, and some occasionally throw projectiles. Paper dolls are ranged enemies who fire high volumes of slow projectiles, while others can heal enemies. We also have forlongs who will call reinforcements if they spot you, wanderers who are simple flying enemies, and their beefier cousins shine dancers. Then there are more annoying enemies like the Retributions, Silent Gazes, and especially the Sanguine Dancer. The last enemy rounding out the roster is the Coochie Sake. What makes her unique is a special attack that causes you to be severed from KK, and that transitions to another unique mechanic. During parts of the story and during fights against the Coochie Sake, KK will be separated from Akito, which means he loses his weaving abilities and must rely on stealth, the bow, and the talismans before he can merge back with KK. But this is where some of my issues lie with the game. This mechanic of taking away your powers and forcing you to use different means to fight your enemies is good on paper. The problem is this mechanic isn't utilized enough to warrant the bow and arrow and talismans at all. When you play normally, your ether is easily replenishable while arrows and talismans are rare to find, and when you want to purchase them, they can be very expensive. Talismans especially. So I played the whole game hardly using the talismans and only using the bow when the game forced me to. Other than that, the rest of my gripes are really just nitpicks. Melee doesn't feel that useful even after some upgrades, and I hardly use the blocking. And this is personal preference, but the recent Doom games made me not want a button for healing items in shooters. Perhaps health gained by acquiring cores could be increased to compensate for removing food? But once again, that's just my personal preference. But despite that, the overall combat felt unique, and good enough to keep me engaged throughout the story. Topped off by unique bosses that were fun to fight. When you're not in combat, your goal in Ghostwire is to traverse the streets of Tokyo to lift the fog to complete main story missions, side missions, and acquire collectibles. The most common collectibles are spirits, which you collect with a Katasoro. You can collect a set amount of spirits at a time before you deposit them at phone booths throughout the city in exchange for XP and money. You could then use the money to upgrade the Katasoro to be able to collect more spirits at a time. Many of these spirits can be found floating around on street level. Some require you to perform a spell before you can collect them. Others are trapped in boxes in which you need to participate in a wave defense skirmish, and more can be found on the rooftops. A useful feature is the ability to use a grapple ability on Tengus, which will zip you up to the top of the buildings. You can also glide for a short time by holding down on the jump button when you're high enough. And thankfully, there's no fall damage. To lift the fog and reveal more of the map, you'll need to reach shrines to cleanse them after dealing with the visitors guarding them. However, unlike the Far Cry towers, you won't reveal all the collectibles within the area. To help you do that, you'll find offering boxes near some of the shrines which you can donate to for a variety of requests. But the only use you will have for them is reviewing specific collectibles within the area the shrine is assigned to. What can be revealed are Jizo statues, which will expand your ether capacity for your spells, and Tanuki, which are little animals playing hide and seek. But not every shrine has an offering box, so finding collectibles in some areas will be a test of patience unless you break out your phone to look up the locations. Other collectibles include graffiti marks, KK's investigation notes, beads which will give you passive bonuses, dog food which you can be given to the pooches throughout the city and will dig up a cash reward for you, capsule toys to use in photo mode, and a variety of collectibles to bring back to special vendors for cash rewards. What's helpful is that the vendor collectibles can be tracked when you visit the vendors to reveal the general area that each collectible is hidden in. But a little problem is that some collectibles are hidden within buildings which are inaccessible until you activate a mission. The last collectibles are Magatama, which are used to unlock tiers within the skill tree and are acquired by pursuing some creatures within the world. Some will require you to chase after them, sneak up on them, or even defend a spirit in a short wave defense skirmish. The skill tree revolves around abilities, weaving, and equipment. Abilities regard traversal, ether gain, and other quality of life upgrades. Weaving allows you to upgrade damage, charging speed, as well as unlock alternate fire modes for each element, and equipment regards food, talismans, and the bow and arrows. Every time you level up, you'll gain 10 skill points to use to unlock the skills. The side missions of the game usually involve talking to a spirit who has a final request before they can pass on to the afterlife. Some requests are simple like finding toilet paper, others require you to enter an apartment to cleanse the cursed specter, or fighting off enemies in more wave defense missions, all the while listening to the short stories of the life of the spirits before their passing. And thanks to free updates, there's some DLC missions, particularly several taking place in a haunted middle school. However, this gameplay structure is one of the weaknesses of Ghostwire. Normally, I would go out to complete all the side content and acquire every collectible. And I did for side missions, capsule toys, the artifacts, and the statues. But for the graffiti, KK's notes, photo scavenger hunts, and the tanuki outside of the offering box areas, I was practically max level and rolling in cash at that point that it felt meaningless to pursue these collectibles. So basically, the open world aspect of Ghostwire Tokyo can be a handicap for some people's enjoyment. On the one hand, I appreciate not being able to reveal every collectible on the map, but on the other, it doesn't feel worth it going up and down the streets to find trivial items. However, I will say if you want to remove the open world aspect of the game to get straight to the good stuff, the game has you covered. The Spider's Thread was a free update which included several quality of life updates, the middle school DLC missions, and the main attraction, a new roguelike mode that's unlocked after Chapter 2 of the main story is completed. Your goal of the Spider's Thread is to complete 30 randomly generated levels in one life. You start every run at the Cat's Paw, a hub where you visit vendors for upgrades. You have a standard shop to buy food, talismans, and arrows. There's also a vendor for beads, which are purchased when upgraded with a new currency, Spirit Thread. In addition to the standard beads, you'll also acquire Chaos beads, which provide random negative and positive effects. These beads don't carry over between runs, so I found it best to dismantle them for more Spirit Thread. Lastly, you have a challenge vendor who will give you rewards based on meta progression challenges you complete. When you start your run, you'll play through randomized levels with different objectives to complete as well as optional challenges for extra XP, and other collectibles like money, food, and Spirit Thread. Every few levels, you fight a boss or gauntlet battle before you're scored based on your performance. Afterwards, you're sent back to the Cat's Paw to prepare for the next set of levels with a reset inventory. If you die at any point, you're sent back to the Cat's Paw at level 1, where your level and set amount of money you've earned are carried over based on how many challenges you've completed. Leveling in the Spider's Thread has been overhauled, where synergy levels now unlock tiers within the skill tree, as well as unlock items at the vendors to be available for purchase. Upgrading in the skill tree now uses money instead of skill points, so it's best to collect as much money as possible to spend on skills just in case you die and lose a sizable amount of it. Overall, the Spider's Thread turned out to be a rather enjoyable mode that felt more fun than the base game. But you might be asking, is it as good or better than the other roguelike mode for the other Bethesda published called Classic? Not quite. Mooncrash is still the king of AAA roguelike, but Spider's Thread isn't a slouch, so you shouldn't write it off. For presentation, Ghostwire meets the standards of AAA gaming. Instead of using the STEM engine again, Tango made the switch to Unreal 4 and put good effort into the presentation. The game ran nearly flawlessly on my mid-powerful rig. The atmosphere of a deserted Tokyo combined with the mystical elements and haunting Eastern soundtrack made for a creepy journey. However, because of the T rating, the horror aspect is less powerful than Tango's previous outings. But because this is more thriller than horror, it gets the job done. As I said in the beginning, the English dub felt off, so the authentic Japanese dub took center stage. Though I can't catch on to the nuances of the language, I can say the actors did a pretty good job with the material, even with the inconsistencies with the pacing of the story.
で、来るんだろ一緒に。
人に物を頼む態度じゃねえな。
頼んではいない。取引だ。お互い拒否はできない。
後悔すんなよ。
In the end, I had a pretty good time with Ghostwire Tokyo. It was a nice change of pace to see Japanese culture through a non-weeb lens, and fighting the visitors with unique magic powers was pretty fun. However, if you're sick of the Far Cry formula, your enjoyment might be hindered too much. If not, you're in for a pretty good time, especially with the addition of Spider's Thread. So with that in mind, Ghostwire Tokyo gets my rating of maybe worth a try. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. See you next time.